The first thing I want to talk about are the heroes, then what they were up against, and then what this has to do with us. So the heroes weren't fighting a conventional battle. I remember when I was living in a moshav, I listened to the songs that the children were singing about Chanukah. And they were talking about fighting for freedom and banishing the others and bringing light to darkness. And it was very beautiful and inspiring to see the kids, but it had nothing to do with what actually happened on Hanukkah. So the backdrop of the Hanukkah story has to be understood by looking at us. The people in that kufa, the kufa of Bayit Sheni, weren't so different than we are. The basic political reality was very similar to today. You had one party that was called the Friends of Rome, who came after the Greeks, but it was the same assimilationist mentality. Many Jews would have been happier if they could press a magic button and have been born Greek. Everything that the Greeks represented was attractive, most of all their intellectual brilliance, but also their human-centered universe, where the beauty of the human being, intellectually, artistically, athletically, was what life is about. Okay, so that's then. And that's what, for some reason that we haven't yet discussed, the Maccabees were fighting. What's the problem? So I want you to focus for a moment on what people see as beautiful and important today. I don't know this to be true, but I'm sure there are a significant number of Jews who, if they could choose to be just regular or Jewish, they would have pressed the just regular button. Because contemporary society, which isn't like Greek society, it's like Roman society, but the Romans fed from the Greeks. Okay, the same things are important. If you were to ask a little boy of 9 in Los Angeles, who do you want to be like when you grow up? If you could be like anyone, who would you want to be? Regular Jewish boy, odds are he would come up with an athletic star or maybe a very famous celebrity. If you were to ask a girl, same age, who would you be like if you want? You could be anyone. She might know the name of a world-class model. She might know the name of a movie star. It's extremely unlikely, except in the most observant circles, they would say something else. So in the very observant circles where the boys that age trade rabbi cards and the girls admire people who've done something with their lives, it's different, but they're a minority. Even the very optimistic people who want to describe the observant community as being 30% of the total Jewish community, which is not a true figure, it's much less. Okay, even they recognize that they're a minority. So that's how it was in the time of the Hanukkah story. Make no mistake, look in the mirror and see the enemy. You know who it is? Us. It's us. The enemy is us. Us in the collective sense, us in the individual sense. Okay. So now I want to get back to what actually happened. So the Greeks didn't come to Israel with the idea of being oppressors. Nobody got up in the morning and said, why am I not more oppressive? That's not what it was. They came with the understanding that the likelihood is that the Jews, like everybody else, will just sup up who they are. And until we showed signs of not doing that, there was really no trouble. So the question is, what were the signs? Okay, now I said, are you a Maccabee or not? Bear this in mind when we talk about the signs. The things that the Greeks objected to the most were things that are distinctly spiritual. When you ask what makes a person human, certainly their body. I mean, if you spill hot soup on me, your body doesn't hurt. Okay, we're also our emotions, we're also our minds. Our minds are the most inner and most private part of self. All of our talk has to do with expressing our minds outwardly. When you ask what the mind actually is, besides all of the physical properties of the brain that make taking in reality possible, there's something additional. There's something that demands and can get connection. So that something is called the Nishama. The Nishama literally means that which was breathed in. In the creation narrative in the Torah, it said God breathed into the first human the breath of life. Okay, so this breath of life, when you breathe in from yourself, is an aspect of what Hashem is. Now, when you say a part of Hashem, that's tricky because you can't divide Hashem into parts like a salami, but there's commonality. And this commonality is something that takes us beyond self. So the spiritual self is an inherent part of us, like the physical self, like the emotional self, it's real. Okay, however, when you look at what makes somebody feel enriched and happy, it's not necessarily the spiritual self. There are people who find their happiness in the physical world, others in the aesthetic world, and others in the spiritual world. So this differentiation began with Noah's children. Imagine the devastation of the Great Flood. I remember when I was, I don't think I was even a teenager. I was younger than that. There was a terrible movie called On the Beach. It was about nuclear devastation, and whatever it was nothing to what the flood was. It was a different world. It was the worst of the worst. Lifespan was sliced in less than half. The atmosphere was polluted. It was a horror. So when the world re-began, what people wanted to do was to define it differently. But each one of Noah's sons had a different definition of what would make humans successful, what would give human satisfaction. So here are the divisions. Okay, you have Shem. The word Shem means name. Would you ever name a child name? Could you imagine what going through life with a name like name would be like today? What's your name? No, what's your name? Name. Okay, could you see this? What's that about? When you give something a name, you create a relationship between you and it. You say, this is what this is to me. So if I call this a computer, it's because to me, that's what it does. To an ant, it would be a gigantic, harsh mountain. Okay, so there are people who see what life is about is defined definition, relationship, and meaning. Okay, that's good. Maybe not. Let's put it to the side. Another way of looking at life, Cham, is life is about energy. It's about wanting to do. It's wanting to feel the adrenaline rush through your veins. It's wanting to have your life be like the constant Ernest Hemingway novel. It's about wanting to feel it all and be it all. Today there's a phrase, FOMO, fear of missing out. What are people afraid of missing out? The grocery list? No. Okay, so it's another way of looking at life. Is it good? Maybe not. There's a third way. The third way is looking at life as being a place in which balance and beauty are what give life meaning. So balance and beauty have to do with music, has to do with art, has to do with the human body, has to do with thought, The balance between form and matter is an important idea in Greek thought. Okay, is that good? Maybe. You can only figure out if something is good or not if you know what the word good means. The Maccabees were fighting for good. The acronym Maccabee, no, it's not the name of beer. No, that isn't what they named themselves after. That's a 20th century device. Okay, it's Mi Kamocha Be'elam Hashem. Who's like you amongst the forces, Hashem? So look at all of the things involved there. Who's like you? Is that Shem? Is that Cham? Is that Yefet? Shem. Who's like you? What are you? Who are you? Kamocha is even similar to you. You know what the answer to who's similar to Hashem is? We are. Every day when you say the Amida, if you say the Amida, right? I know, okay. One of the central blessings in the very first part, which is devoted to praise, has these words. I'll say it in Hebrew and then in English. Ata kadosh, v'shimcha kadosh, v'kadoshim b'chol yom yalukasela. You're holy, whatever that means. Your name is holy, whatever that signifies. And your holy ones praise you every day. You know who your holy ones are? Us. What does holy mean anyway? People like to say, like God. Holy means like God. So what do we mean when we say God is holy? Like himself? Holy means separate from everything that limits you. What limits you is time, space, subjectivity, desire. And when you shave all of those things away, you know what you have? You have the spiritual self. So all of us, and in that regard, we're compared to the angels, the forces that do God's will. Everyone has a bit of transcendency in them. So when I asked, is it good? Shem could be good if he uses his desire to understand and devote himself to defining relationships to find God and what's God like. So I want to give you an illustration of this. What does that mean to devote your life to this? Does it mean necessarily studying all day long? Maybe, maybe not. What does it mean? What is a devoted person? What does a devoted person look like? So I'm going to give you an example of somebody many of you have heard of. You heard of Rav Ovadia Yosef. When I say he was a holy person, a person above all of the limitations, I don't mean completely holy. Only God is completely holy. Humans are going to be limited no matter what. But when you're talking about moving above limitations, I'll tell you just two very short stories about him. One isn't even about him. He was brilliant. His father had a grocery store. And in those years, having a grocery store was a hard job. And people were poor. And how much money do you make? How much money do you make on a loaf of bread? If you're selling a loaf of bread, what was the equivalent of $1 to poor people who would buy a half a loaf if they only needed a half a loaf? How much money could you make? The grocery store surely didn't have things like peanut butter in it, jelly. It had bread. It had hard cheese. It was a hard living. There was nothing. And then things reached a point where his father couldn't pay a helper any longer. So at a grocery store, you need someone to stand by the cash register because if not, the groceries walk out. But you also need somebody to put the goods on the shelves, put them back when they get messed up, receive supplies, keep the books. You can't do a grocery, a one-person grocery doesn't work. So he took his son out of school. Okay, somebody, Rav Moshe Parish, heard about this, and he went to Rav Ovadia's father, and he said, how much would it cost you to pay a helper? He told him an amount. He said, get a helper, I'm going to pay you for the helper. Now, why did he do this? In your own mind, put the reason into words. Was he going to gain something physically? Was this going to appeal to the chum in him? FOMO, earn money and give. No. Is this going to appeal to the yefet in him? Not really. Would only appeal to the Shem, to the part that says there's meaning. Okay, another short story. Okay, another short story which happens to be my favorite story. Okay, so my favorite story about Rav Ovadia is this. He was a young rabbi. He had tried to go to Egypt first to take a rabbinical position there. And he ended up in Cairo, which in those years was a very cosmopolitan city. The Jews, they were like us, not completely devoted. They wanted to feel like they were eating kosher, but they didn't necessarily care if it was kosher or not. I'm not saying that you're like that, but I'm saying the voice that was heard there was also another voice, not just Torah. So the butchers threatened his life because he wouldn't give him kosher certification. He had to escape. So he's back in Israel. He took any position he can get, and he was rabbi of a synagogue. It was in a development town. So when the services would end on Shabbos, he'd go out, and for the kind of boys who have not much to do, who sit on the fence. Do you know what I mean? Be in Israel. They're sitting on the fence, a bag of sunflower seeds, watching the day go by, and it's boring, and there's nothing to do in a development town. And they decide, like, take little pebbles. How many pebbles do you need to knock the rabbi's hat off his head? Could you do it in 4? Could you do it in 3? Okay. So it was a game. It wasn't something that was meant to be offensive or full of chutzpah necessarily, although it was both. So the boys threw his hat off his head. He picked it up. 2 of the 3 boys were there ran away. The third one didn't run away. He looked somewhat confused. And Rav Haradi went and said, "What are you doing?" And he said to Slicha Harav, like, what's he going to say? Then Rav Ovadia asked the critical question. Are you ready to hear the critical question? Do you have where to go for lunch? That's the critical question. And he said, no. He said, my wife makes fish. She makes chamim. Okay, he came. And to make a long story short, that became a habit. To make a longer story short, it became have lunch, take a nap, stay for Sudah Shlishit. Come with me before Sudah Shlishit. We're going to Mincha. Hear Pirkei Avot. Okay. Unwillingly, but going. Came one week, he said, it's already Motzei Shabbat. It's already time for Havdalah. And Rav Ovadia says to him, what are you going to do tonight? He said, my friends are going to the movies. She said, and you? So I don't know, plus 5 shekels. I don't know what I'm going to do tonight. That's the truth. He gave him 5 shekels to go to the movies. I know his sons. His sons are adults. Some of them were older than me. Most of them are younger than me. Trust me, they never saw movies when they were children. They would go over to him when they were kids. It was a different world. They would approach him and they would kiss his hand and they could say, Efshar ledaber im Abba. That's what the derech eretz in their household. In that household, Rav Ovadia gave a stranger 5 shekels that he didn't have to go to the movies. Why did he do that? Why did he do that? He felt the guy was culturally deprived. He saw another human being who had an empty space. So the person who told the story is the young man himself, who's not young now. He's a dayan, he's a rabbinical judge. That's what being human is about. Being a MACCABEE means fighting for the humanity in yourself. Mi chamocha be'elim. Who is like you, Hashem, amongst forces? Is it physical force? Is it balance as an end in itself? Is it the limited intellectual powers of humans? Who is like you amongst the forces? It's a big question. It's a question that without Torah, we would not be able to answer. Sincere people, brilliant people, good people try to answer that question. Without Torah, you don't have the answer. Okay, so the Greeks, their life force, their intellectual brilliance, their sincerity of search, their achievements were not inconsiderable. And because when you're using your mind and not your spirit, you're looking at the observable world, the world of art, the world of athletics, the world of observable balance between form and matter and various intellectual paths that come forth from that. It's all in the observable world. I want to tell you something interesting. I tell people things are interesting, so really, okay, whatever. Okay, so if you want to see the place where what that being a MACCABEE is expressed, would be the Beis HaMikdash, which the Romans defiled. Okay, you've seen pictures of the Beis HaMikdash. So I still remember, no, in truth, I don't remember, but I've seen other people do this. You talk about the Beis HaMikdash, I think it's going to be this giant palatial building. No, it's a series of courtyards leading to a relatively small building. So at first, there's Harabai, a temple mount. Anybody could be there. You go in. There is one courtyard, another courtyard, each one becoming progressively more exclusive, till you get to the sanctuary. The sanctuary was divided into 2 rooms. The outer room had the sacred table, the menorah, the incense altar. There was a curtain separating it from the next chamber, which had the Holy Ark. Okay, this is all called Heichal. The word Heichal is 65. The word Yavan is 66 in Gematria. If you're looking with your eyes, Yavan is greater than Heichal. If you're using the human mind with all of its limitations, Yavan is greater than Heichal. That's the way it is. So people had assimilated because they were going by what they see. Hashem. Who is like you amongst the forces? If you think that you are the core force of the world, if you have a human-centered world, here's the world and here's you in the center as a human being, not as an individual, you have no room for Hashem. Where's room for Hashem? Okay, so the tensions and the battles became more extreme. Okay, and the Greeks, because they were brilliant, because they got it, they knew what the enemy was. You know what the enemy was? Shabbos. That's the enemy. Bris Milah. That's the enemy. Rosh Chodesh. That's the enemy. Jewish marriage. That's the enemy. The enemy? The enemy to what? The enemy to seeing a human-centered world as the be-all, end-all. So what the Beis Hamikdash was in space, it occupies space, and it becomes progressively more exclusive until there's only the self and Hashem. Okay, that's what Shabbos is to time and space of the physical world. Shabbos is to time. It's sacred time. You do less and less of self. That's how you be a Maccabee today. You make your Shabbos a Shabbos where there's an inner reality. There's less self. You're not in your business, and you're not playing the piano, and you're not going rowing, and you're okay. It's sacred time. It doesn't mean that you're not enjoying it. Quite the opposite. Shabbos is called the time of oneg, which is a word for spiritual delight. That's your Maccabee today. You make your Shabbos a Shabbos. That requires planning. Another thing they saw was Brit Milah. Brit Milah. Today, as you know, there are anti-circumcision movements. You know this. Say, well, the baby has his rights. I mean, the same people who are pro-abortion are wondering about the baby's rights. They'll spare my opinions on that one. They have their right to be what? A citizen of a human-centered world. They see the human body as perfect. We see the human body as something that one perfects. It's a completely different view. Life is meant to be dynamic, full of change, moving forward, closer and closer to what? To being a person whose Michamoch Be'elam Hashem is real. The idea of circumcision taking place on the 8th day, the world's creation, Shabbat or 7, something beyond that. The word for 8 in Hebrew is Shmona. Its 3-letter root, Shin Mem Nun, is the same as Shemen, oil. There's an aspect of reality that rises above ordinary life. The word for materialism in Hebrew is Gashmiut. Its 3-letter root is the word Geshem, rain. So I want you to picture a cup. See my cup? See, you all see it? It's full of water. I just poured some oil into it. Okay, and it floats, right? So you have the Olam Hagashmi, all water relates to rain. Okay, and on top of that you have Shemen, that which floats on top, the transcendental world. And you're introducing a child to that on the 8th day. Now, how much choice does the child have? Be'emet. And what does the child know? He doesn't like you. Really knows from nothing. So the message is there's an aspect of being that goes beyond the human mind and human choice making. Hashem. Okay. They opposed Rosh Chodesh. Now, who cares about Rosh Chodesh? Okay, they didn't have a calendar then. It was a big deal. There was a ceremony. So what? And Rosh Chodesh was the first mitzvah we were given as a group, don't forget. What's the big deal? So I want to tell you the big deal. We spoke about space and time. Okay, Rosh Chodesh has to do with us giving time definition. We're not defined by the time. Okay, we are saying this is what the time will be. We're sanctifying. We're saying we're going to use the time God gives us to becoming more like Him. In our real lives, in the physical world. Now, so here it is. The Maccabees are fighting with the Greeks, and two miracles happened. And these are miracles. The great miracles are meant to give us inspiration for seeing small miracles. Did you know that? We're not going to see the sea split, but we're going to see small miracles. And I'm sure I'll give you 30 seconds to think about it. I used to be able to give the day girls 5 minutes. Last year I brought it down to 1 minute. 30 seconds, that's it. I want you to do a survey of every miracle you saw in your entire life in 30 seconds. And you're going to tell me it felt like it was very long. Okay, didn't it feel long? I'm going to have to reduce it to 20 seconds. Okay, so the big miracles attune you, if you want, to seeing God's interventions in the world continually. So I've just told you two things that seem contradictory. On one hand, the human mind is limited to what's observable and describable. And on the other hand, we're saying what? Bring Hashem right into it. And both things are true. Hashem's in the world and above the world at the same time. Remember Pesach? No, don't let her talk about Pesach. I'm sorry. Anything but that. Okay. So you said at the Seder, Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu. Blessed is the Makom. That's Hashem. Why is he called HaMakom, which means the place? Gemara says, Hu Mekomo Shel Olam Ben HaOlam Mekomo. He's the place in which the world is located, but the world's not his place. Everything in the world is in him, but there's more. So if you're Milchamocha Be'elam Hashem, we're saying, who is like you amongst forces Hashem? You're above time, space, physicality, but in it as well, so that everything we do counts. So one miracle was the war. We were committed, so we fought. And if we wouldn't have fought, I don't know what would have happened. So we're meant to stand for what we believe in and to fight the good fight inside of ourselves, outside of ourselves, against the Greeks, in ourselves, outside of ourselves. And then Hashem helps. And he doesn't have to help in ways that you could have foresaw. Many given over to the few, etc. Okay, the righteous, the wicked given over to the righteous. We don't have to be afraid. So one miracle had to do with the concrete world. Hashem is in the world. And the second miracle was the miracle of the menorah. Where what? Where it lit for 8 days. Could you figure it out? No, it's above the world. It's in the constellation of the number 8, not the number 7. So to conclude, don't get nervous. People know when I say to conclude, that means, she's going to go on another 5 hours. Okay, take out your calendar, not your watch. But in any case, to conclude, you have to decide. You have to decide who you want to be, because if you just float, society decides for you. You could be a Greek or you could be a Maccabee. And right now, probably we're just ordinary Jews, somewhere between. But the real simcha lies with deciding to be a Maccabee, and that's what I'm going to leave you with. So you have a wonderful Chanukah, a Chanukah full of light, a Chanukah where when you eat all of the oily Chanukah foods, you think of something more beyond the calories. Okay. A time where you could say, I am one of them. And when you say them, you mean the Maccabees. Have a great Chanukah. Bye.